The gym was buzzing. Fans of all stripes, whether they were loyal to Christie's sides or enamored with Caitlin Clark, felt the weight in the air. Christie's sides, a firebrand in her own right, was in no mood to hold back, and Caitlin Clark, for all of her skill on the court, had stepped into something bigger than a simple basketball rivalry. The spark? An offhand comment Clark made about Coach Stephanie White. It was just enough to ignite Christie's sides, and anyone who's watched sides for any length of time knows she doesn't take lightly to anyone criticizing her colleagues or the game she loves. It was clear that sides wasn't about to let Clark get away with it, no matter the star power Clark held. Christie sides may not have Clark's national spotlight, but in that moment, she owned every inch of it. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. The thing about Christie is that she's unapologetically intense. That's her signature style, her way of conducting business, her approach to coaching, and yes, her approach to defending her friends and colleagues. So when Caitlin Clark's words came out, Christie didn't merely respond with a "hey, that's not cool." No, this was a full-blown, no-holds-barred retort. For Christie, it wasn't about protecting Coach White's reputation. It was about standing up for what was right in the sport, a sport that means everything to her. Her response had the kind of energy that made her seem like she was laying down the law on behalf of all basketball coaches, past and present, who have been overlooked or dismissed. With every syllable, Sides was both defending her friend and making a larger statement about respect in the game. As she spoke, her gestures said as much as her words. Sides has always been expressive, both on and off the court. Her arms wave, her hands point, and there's that unmistakable intensity in her eyes. And while this passion makes her an incredible coach, it also makes her a fierce ally and a bit of a danger to anyone who crosses her path unfairly. If someone's brave enough to say something that goes against what she values, they better be prepared for the full force of her response. When Christie Sides is on a mission to set things straight, it's like watching a storm build up and unleash. She becomes her own kind of spectacle, her voice rising, her tone unwavering, each point she makes sharper than the last. People in the gym that day had no choice but to be captivated, whether they were used to her fiery outbursts or witnessing one for the first time. And here's where things get interesting. While Clark might have been aiming for a quick remark, perhaps one meant to hint at something she believed, Sides saw it as a challenge, and she wasn't about to walk away from it. Caitlin Clark, for all her acclaim, had unwittingly become part of a lesson that Sides was eager to deliver. When Christie began her retort, she wasn't rambling. Every word was measured, her tone controlled, and her intent unmistakable. To her, defending Stephanie White wasn't simply about standing up for a friend. It was about ensuring that Clark, and anyone watching, understood the code of respect that the game demanded. Stephanie White, after all, wasn't just any coach. She was one of those figures in the sport who had put in years of dedication and had earned her stripes. And for Christie, any disrespect toward White was disrespect toward the entire coaching fraternity. Sides' fervor was palpable. Each point she made about Coach White was laced with an undeniable sense of pride. She wasn't just defending White's abilities. She was painting a picture of a mentor, a leader, someone who had sacrificed more than most to the love of the game. And that's where Sides excels. She brings a raw, unfiltered honesty that doesn't try to sugarcoat or dress up the truth. To her, Stephanie White's journey wasn't just a resume or a career track. It was a badge of honor that deserved respect. Sides wanted Clark to see White for who she truly was, a seasoned veteran who didn't deserve to be undercut by a few careless words. Christie's words almost had a rhythm, a pulse that built in intensity, each sentence driving her point home harder than the last. It was like watching a well-rehearsed performance, one that she seemed born to give. Amid her impassioned defense, there was an undeniable humor in her delivery, an unspoken sense that Christie Sides knew exactly how serious and how over-the-top she could be, and didn't care. She seemed to relish the moment, using it as a sort of theatrical release, almost performing for those around her. There were smirks and eye rolls, and her body language bordered on the exaggerated, as if she was playing to an invisible crowd, reveling in each beat of her impassioned tirade. This wasn't just about defending a friend, this was Christie Sides having her moment, perhaps realizing how entertaining she was to those around her, even as she made her serious points. Her antics were just as much a part of her message as her words, adding a layer of intensity and humor that only she could pull off. At one point, Christie zeroed in on Clark, her voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in a bit closer. With her words slowed, almost in a whisper, she laid out a vision of what it truly means to be a coach like Stephanie White, what it means to commit years to the game, what it means to sacrifice personal time, family events, and more, all in the name of building up others. She illustrated the late nights, the heartbreaks, the tough losses that every coach knows all too well. And that's what she wanted Clark to understand, that coaching is not something to take lightly, nor are those who have dedicated their lives to it. Through it all, Sides was as much a storyteller as she was a defender. In fact, at certain moments, she almost seemed to forget that she was addressing Clark at all. Instead, she seemed to drift into a space where she was recounting Stephanie White's journey in vivid detail, describing what it takes to earn respect in the world of coaching. She spoke of White's early days, her battles, her relentless pursuit of excellence. And every person listening could tell that this wasn't just a list of achievements, this was a testimony, a narrative woven out of years of mutual respect and admiration. Sides wasn't just speaking about White. She was immortalizing her, casting her as a legendary figure who deserved every ounce of respect that Christie herself gave so freely. As the gym fell silent, there was a sense of unity, an unspoken agreement among those watching that Christie Sides had made her point, and then some. Even Clark seemed affected. Her previously confident stance softened as Sides' words washed over her. This wasn't the type of rebuttal Clark had expected, but it was certainly the one she got. Sides, true to her nature, didn't give a watered-down response, nor did she hold back her feelings. She was there to make sure everyone understood the weight of her words and the importance of respect. For Sides, it was never just about basketball. It was about honoring those who dedicate themselves to it, who live it day in and day out, who see the court as more than a place to win or lose. It was about the soul of the game, the lifeblood of every coach who had given themselves to it. When she finished, Sides didn't stick around to bask in her victory. There were no lingering glances or smug expressions. Instead, she delivered her final words with the same conviction she'd started with, then simply walked away, leaving everyone to process what they'd just witnessed. Her departure was as impactful as her entrance. She didn't need applause or validation. For Christie Sides, standing up for what she believed in was enough, and her calm exit only reinforced her stance. There was a sense that she had done what she'd come to do, no more, no less. It was classic Christie, and anyone who knew her wouldn't have expected anything different. In the days following, the conversation shifted, and people remembered her words. They replayed her expressions, the way she defended White, and the way she'd single-handedly brought a gym full of people to an almost reverent silence. Christie Sides' passionate defense of Coach Stephanie White wasn't just a response, it was a moment of revelation, a reminder of the respect, loyalty, and dedication that underpins the true spirit of sports. It was the kind of moment that resonated long after the game ended, the kind of story people would tell for years, adding their own bits and pieces, embellishing the intensity, making Christie's words echo across gyms far and wide. And if anyone thought that Christie Sides would regret what she'd said or feel she'd gone too far, they didn't know her well. She hadn't spoken out of anger alone, but out of a deep-rooted sense of right and wrong, of what the game of basketball, and all those who dedicate their lives to it, deserve. As far as Christie Sides was concerned, if there was anyone who still didn't understand why Stephanie White deserved respect, they just hadn't been listening.